Shabbat Shalom. Welcome. I'm Rabbi Andy Vogel, and I want to especially welcome you here tonight to Temple Sinai. Tonight we're hosting a very special and very unusual Shabbat evening service to honor the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and to commit ourselves to continue to work for racial justice. And we are very proud to host the entire Brookline faith community here in our congregation tonight in partnership with the Brookline Clergy Association, the Brookline Interfaith Clergy Association, which is our association of Brookline clergy leaders that meets each month, led by our convener, Reverend Ken French, and has racial justice on our agenda as an ongoing issue. We especially want to express our gratitude to our good friends at two neighborhood Jewish congregations just down the street, Temple Oave Shalom and Temple Beth Zion, who have taken the extraordinary step tonight of canceling their Shabbat evening services and directing their entire congregations to join us here this evening. And I'm very pleased to welcome their rabbis, my friends, Rabbi Audrey Marcus Berkman from Oave Shalom, and Rav Tiferet Berenbaum from TBZ. Rav Claudia is away at a conference, who will co-lead many of the Jewish prayers and readings tonight with me, along with our student rabbi, Talia Stein, and many of our colleagues from the Brookline Clergy Association will help lead the service as well. And we have individuals who have generously stepped forward to share with us their own personal reflections from the Brookline community on race, and we have the opportunity to hear them. And we especially want to thank our friends, the musicians who are here tonight from Center Communities Band. And tonight, we have the blessing of hearing a message, a sermon, a Devar Torah, from our guest speaker this evening, Reverend Irene Monroe, theologian, columnist, co-host of WGBH's radio show, All Revved Up. And she'll be speaking this evening on healing our isms. And we want to extend a very warm welcome to you, Reverend Irene. We recognize that for many people this evening, this might be the very first time that you've attended a Shabbat evening service in a synagogue. And so we particularly want to welcome you. And then we also know that there are others who haven't attended a Shabbat service in a very long time. And you know who you are. And we want to welcome you too. For those who are joining us here for the first time or are unfamiliar with Hebrew, we want to point out that in our service booklet tonight, all of the Hebrew is transliterated. We invite you to try it, to join along, to sing along, and to lift up your voices in song. Shabbat, the seventh day of the week, is envisioned by Jewish tradition as a day of stopping, a day of ceasing our work, a day of reflecting, of recognizing the world that is, a good world, but a broken world. Finding the blessing of spiritual renewal on Shabbat for ourselves so that we can then do the work to bring about the world that can be, but which is not yet. Shabbat is a time to gather together with your community because we find strength in community. We strengthen each other. We learn from each other. We see with our own eyes when we gather in community the truth of the great theological teaching that the great diversity of humankind, with all its variation and all its variety, that everything and everyone are all deeply bound together as one. Within the great oneness of all beings, which we Jews call Elohim, or Adonai, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One of Blessing. So in the spirit of the prophet Isaiah, who taught, Ki ve'ti ve'tefillah yikareh l'chol ha'amim, may my house be called a house of prayer for all people. We welcome everyone here tonight. Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, atheist, agnostic, teenagers, socialist, Democrat, Republican, independent, white, black, every color in the rainbow, LGBTQ, straight, all of humankind seeking to be our truest selves as God created us. May all find in this sacred space tonight a warm welcome as Shabbat begins and as we draw inspiration from the life and teachings of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We're going to begin in the middle of page 2.
Hear the words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. An individual has not started living until he can rise above the narrow confines of his individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity. Every man must decide whether he will walk in the light of creative altruism or the darkness of destructive selfishness. This is the judgment. Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others?
Let's do it together.
Seventh day is a place and time which we build. It is made of soul, joy, and medicine. It is not an interlude, the climax of living. The meaning of Shabbat is to celebrate time, gathered in space. 6 days a week, we live under the tyranny of things of space. On Shabbat, we try to become attuned to the holiness in time. It is the day on which we are called upon to share in what is eternal and time, to turn from the result of creation to the mystery of creation, from the world of creation to the creation of the world. Now we're going to welcome Shabbat in through the lighting of the Shabbat candles.
Amen. Baruch atah Eloheinu asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu le'alichem Shabbat Shalom. Page 3. Please join us as we welcome the angels of Shabbat. We're told that when we come to the synagogue and when we leave the synagogue, that we're accompanied by God's messengers who bless us with shalom, with peacefulness, and with blessing. Adonai. My pleasure to call forward Jenny Stetson.
Good evening. My name is Dennis Cooper Denton. I grew up in Montgomery, Alabama. Montgomery, Alabama, as most of you will know, was the capital of the Confederate States. The main street of Montgomery, Alabama was, I think most of you can guess, Dexter Avenue. The street began at the front steps of the Capitol. If you came down the steps of the Capitol, turn left and went 1/2 block, turn right across the street and went 1 block. What do you think you would find at the end of that block? The Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. Montgomery was the capital of the Confederate States. The main street of the city is Dexter Avenue, which began at the steps of the Capitol. And it's now over 150 some years old. It just so happens that my great aunt and her husband, Will Phillips, were some of the founding members of the church. And my brother and I were baptized in the church at age 6 and 7, which was a long time ago. As were other members of the family baptized. When Reverend King became the minister of the church, and Rosa Parks refused to move to the back of the house. It was, by the way, it was going only to the black community. So most people who got on, especially black, they sat down any place they wanted to. They didn't have to sit behind the marker that said colored and with the one that said white in front of them. It was a very good place for Reverend King to go and be there at that time and to take the right steps as a very young man at that particular time. I can go on and tell you, and I will show this to you, when I was, believe it or not, 89 years old, I went back to Montgomery. We went to the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, my brother and I, who lives in Atlanta, Georgia now. And we sat in the same pew that we sat in as young people. And this is a sign outside of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. I think I only had a few minutes to talk, but I do have some material if any of you want to see it. This is a folder of the church when it celebrated its 137th years of existence. And if you would like to look at these things, you are more than welcome to look at them. Thank you very much.
Every Shabbat is a possibility for a new beginning, a fresh start, a shedding of the old or tired or wounded or sad, a welcoming of potential, renewal, growth, possibility, a steadfast belief and trust in a better world now and in the future. Rabbi Princess Bowman.
Page 4 in the middle, we'll sing the song that Jews have been singing for about 500 years, which is relatively recent in Jewish history, to welcome Shabbat, to greet Shabbat. Beloved, come to meet the presence of Shabbat. Come greet Shabbat. Wake up, for your light has come with the seventh day. Rise up, give voice to song. We'll sing 4 verses here. They're printed in your booklet, and our practices, as Jews have been doing for centuries. When we come to the 4th verse, if you wish, I invite you to rise in body or in spirit, face the entrance as Jews have been doing. As we say to the presence of Shabbat, when the door is open, come into our synagogue, come into our hearts and bless us with peace and rest and blessing. And we invite you to remain standing. Together, page 4 with the band. Here we go. And now that we've greeted Shabbat, I invite you just to close your eyes and to feel yourself in this space. Feel your feet on the floor and know that you are here and nowhere else. And to greet Shabbat in your heart. And our practice is to invite everyone to take a deep breath, to breathe in the blessing and the rest of Shabbat. Take a deep breath. Shabbat Shalom. Now before you sit down, I invite you to greet all the people around you, in front of you, behind. If you don't know their names, introduce yourself. If you come from a certain community, tell them where you're from. Wish each other Shabbat Shalom.
It's actually not cooked.
Page 5, you'll remain standing for 3 interfaith calls to prayer.
O God, the source of our common life, when we are dry and scattered, when we are divided and alone, we long for connection. We long for community. Brother God, with those we live beside, who are often strange to us, whom we may be afraid to approach, yet who have riches of friendship to share, we long for connection. We long for community. With those we have only heard of, who see with different eyes, whose struggles we try to imagine, whose fierce joy we wish we could grasp. We long for connection. We long for community. With those we shall never know, but whose lives are linked with ours, whose shared ground we stand on, and whose common air we breathe. We long for connection. We long for community. When we are dry and scattered, when we are divided and alone, when we are cut off from the source of our life. Open our graves, O God, that all your people may be free to breathe, strong to move, and joyful to stand together to celebrate your name. Amen.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
Adonai Tzvaot Shemo, Chai v'Kayam, Tamid Lo Chaleinu Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai, Amari V'David.
I bring you greetings from the United Parish of Brookline, the closest neighboring temple, Sinai, and French, along here tonight with my associate, Amy Moore. Let's join in this reading of Twilight People. As the sun sinks and the colors of the day turn, we offer a blessing for the twilight. For twilight is neither day nor night, but in between. We are all twilight people. We can never be fully labeled or defined. We are many identities and loves, many genders and none. We are in between roles, at the intersection of histories, or between place and place. We are crisscrossed paths of memory and destination, streets of life swirling together. We are neither day nor night. We are both, neither and all. May the sacred in-between of this evening suspend our certainties, soften our judgments, brighten our vision. May this in-between light illuminate our way to God who transcends all categories and definitions. May the in-between people who have come to pray be lifted up in this twilight. We cannot always define, we can always say a blessing. Blessed are you, my Lord, who brings on the twilight.
For another personal reflection, it's my pleasure to call forward Brookline resident Colin Stokes. As a non-athletic Jew in San Antonio, I grew up feeling excluded. I didn't know the Jesus references or the football teams or the shorter words for things. So I had a sympathy for folks who weren't at the top of the pyramid. In college, I thought I'd finally feel like I fit in with other intellectual types, but I felt excluded there too. I didn't even know the names of the clubs I wasn't going to get into because I hadn't heard of the prep schools that I would have had to go to get into them. I went on to an opening night of a student play, something called Black Tie. I didn't have a tux, so I had to rent one. Can you imagine? I was in my 30s before I was working in a somewhat multiracial environment, an organization, a nonprofit, and I had that feeling of exclusion again. Now it was my new Black and Latinx coworkers who made references I didn't know. An entire canon of music, styles of dress and hair, and a knowledge of the company's mission that seemed richer and sadder than the PowerPoint decks that the leadership was emailing around. At this late date, my understanding of my place in the world started to slowly turn upside down. I finally started to see that whatever my feelings, I was a member of a club, the most powerful club of all in this country, white people. I saw that no matter how left out I might have felt in my life, I am not actually left out on a societal scale. In fact, I'm on the inside of the inside, straight, white, male, healthy, wealthy. Harvard, I didn't mention that, Harvard. Brookline, homeowner. I'm not really excluded from anything meaningful. I am a top predator. But I've decided to hold on to that feeling of exclusion, that memory of the hurt of being left out, because it's precious. It's the seed of empathy. If I felt that bad because of the tuxedo, imagine people eyeing you everywhere you went.
Imagine being passed over for promotion, being denied a loan, being assaulted by police officers sworn to protect you. I'm embarrassed to tell this story because I was so shallow and clueless, and probably still am. But being a top predator doesn't mean I can't feel vulnerable. It's just that because I'm white and all the other things, I really am vulnerable. Which means I have an opportunity to take some risks and to help those who are excluded to get in the door. Or better yet, to break down the walls that keep people out in the first place. Thank you.
We bear witness to the oneness that is the source of all life, of being itself. We bear witness to that in whose ultimate unity we are connected and reflected. We all bear within us the divine spark created in the image of the divine. We bear witness to our ultimate interconnectedness, interwovenness with the words of the Shema. We're on page 7 in the booklet. Shema Yisrael Adonai We continue with these words from Torah. We join together in singing the Jewish people's great song of gratitude for liberation, a song of gratitude to which we can all relate through the different lenses of our own traditions and historical and lived experience. We join together for Mi Hamocha on page 8.
ויעלום יחזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני, גאל ישראל.
The words of Martin Luther King Jr. I must make two honest confessions to you, my Christian and Jewish brothers. First, I must confess that over the past few years, I've been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I've almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block is in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection.
Together we'll sing the first blessing of the Friday night Amidah, the Friday night standing prayer, which calls us to remember our ancestors, all the beloveds who are poured into us as we stand in this moment, on whose shoulders we stand, on whose legacies we are here because of. We remember them and we honor them. And after we sing that blessing together, we'll have a few moments for silence. And it's the Jewish tradition on the Sabbath to not ask God for anything, but to believe that this world is now perfect. And to imagine and to hold on to that belief. And so I invite you to do the same thing and just spend some moments dwelling in a space of gratitude and joy for all of the blessings that you find yourself with this evening. I invite you to rise and join me as we sing this blessing on page 8.
As Rav Tiferet said on Shabbat, we experience the world as it could be. Our sages taught we experience a taste of redemption. But it's our task to bring that taste of redemption out into the ordinary time of the rest of the week. We remind ourselves that it is up to us, that it is our sacred task to build this world from love, from justice, from compassion, from peace. So we sing these lines from Psalm 89 on page 9, and I'm grateful that my co-conspirator Andy O'Connell, who plays a guitar to accompany many of our Friday night services at Ohavei Shalom, is here to sing with me and to play this beautiful rendition. Olam chesed yimaneh, yadai, 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 yadai. Olam chesed yimaneh, yadai, 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 yadai. Olam chesed yimaneh. I will build this world from love. You must build this world from love.
Repeat after me, please. Ana. Elna. Refana. La. One more time. Ana. Elna. Refana. La. These are Moses' words in Hebrew, in the book of Numbers, asking for healing for his sister Miriam when she was stricken with illness. And there are words that we use tonight as we think of all of our dear ones, all of the people who are in our hearts, who are dealing with illness, who need a blessing of healing of body, if it's possible, healing of spirit for all, refuah shlema, complete healing. So, may the mysterious source of life, bless with life and healing, all those in all our communities who struggle with illness or brokenness. May they be blessed with healing of body, healing of the spirit, and with a complete healing. And as our practice, I invite you now, as my glance meets yours, to recite the name of someone for whom you're asking God's blessing for healing tonight.
Milton Cohen, David Regan,
Please join me. Ana, Elna, Refana, La. We'll listen. Well, it's my pleasure now to introduce and welcome our guest speaker for the evening, Reverend Irene Monroe, who is a nationally acclaimed activist, ordained minister, lesbian feminist, public theologian, and very much sought after motivational speaker and preacher. Reverend Monroe does the weekly Monday segment, All Revved Up, on WGBH 89.7 FM of Boston Public Radio, and you can hear her there each week, and you can also download podcasts of the broadcast. She is also a visiting scholar in the Religion and Conflict Transformation Program at Boston University's School of Theology, and she is the Boston voice for Detour's African American Heritage Trail, a walking tour of Beacon Hill. And I'm pleased to say she is now a brand new friend. So please welcome Reverend Irene Monroe.
Good evening. It's Shabbat Shalom, my brothers and sisters. I come from a different tradition. When I saw the pulpit, I come from one where we talk over the congregation here, but I promise I will stay on text. But I just want to say it is an absolute honor to be here with you this evening. Thank you for having me. Like many of you who have gathered here today, this evening, I am committed to and humbled by the words and teachings of Martin Luther King. And like so many, I too stand on the shoulders of this brother. Our job in keeping King's dream alive is to be part of a participatory government that is working to dismantle all existing discriminatory laws that truncate our full participation in the fight to advance democracy for all people. Too many people thought then and continue to think even now that King's statements regarding justice was only about race in the African American community. Many fail to see how King's vision of inclusion and community is far expansive than we might have once imagined. Justice for King was more than legal and moral issues. It was a human issue. And this was evident by King's speeches on more than just one occasion. For example, King told a mixed audience once that the revolution for human rights is opening up unhealthy areas in American life and permitting a new and wholesome healing to take place. Eventually, the civil rights movement will have contributed infinitely more to this nation than just the eradication of racial injustice. My life's work is really grounded in an intersectional anti-oppression activism. As a queer religion columnist, I try to inform the public the role religion plays in discrimination, because homophobia is both the hatred of the other, and is usually acted upon in the name of religion. You see, if I was in Black church, people say, amen, sister, so say amen. By reporting religion in the news, I aim to highlight how religious intolerance not only shatters the goal of American democracy, but also aids in perpetuating other forms of oppression, such as racism, classism, sexism, transphobia, homophobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, just to name a few. It is the hatred of the other that I want to share with you this story of a man I knew by the name of Fritz. This is a story about an incident that occurred when I was 8 years old, growing up in a Black, predominantly Christian enclave in Brooklyn, New York. The scene is a Sunday morning in church. The year is 1963, and it's during children's time in worship. This particular Sunday, it was my turn to stand in front of the congregation and to share what I learned in Sunday school that morning. The lesson that Sunday was from the book of Daniel, and was about the 3 Hebrew boys escaping a fiery furnace. As I stood in front of the congregation, my pastor asked me if I knew the name of the 3 Hebrew boys. And I said, yes, I do. Now, the names of these boys are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. However, with my 8-year-old ears, I thought my pastor said Shadrach, Meshach, and a big Negro. The church responded just as you have. Now you can hear the folks say, bless her little heart. God bless her, God bless her. My pastor went to correct me and he said, the 3rd Hebrew boy's name is Abednego. And I said, oh, but isn't he the big Negro? Then he asked me, what did I mean? The story is about 3 Hebrew boys, I said. It's about the boys, they were thought to be bad people. And they really weren't, but somehow they escaped this fiery furnace. My pastor, he nods his head and he says, go on, child. What I said next, I had not only my pastor's attention, but also the entire congregation. I told my pastor I knew 3 people like the Hebrew boys who escaped the fiery furnace. My pastor asked, could you name my 3 Hebrew boys? And I said, yes. Martin Luther King was one of them. And I saw the heads of the congregation nod as I said his name. And the pastor asked me, why is King in the fiery furnace? And I said, because he's trying to set us free, and we always say an extra prayer for him during church. Now, to give you some context, I was also referring to August of 1963, when I, along with many churches in Brooklyn, went down to the March on Washington and got to hear the historic march, the historic I Have a Dream speech. Then my pastor said to me, well, can you name someone else? And I said, yes, Hansel and Gretel. Yeah, and the church laughed just as she did. I proceeded to tell him why, and I said that the witch wanted to fatten up Hansel and eat him, and when she thought he was fattened up enough, she goes to prepare this oven. But instead, he and his sister tricks her, and he escapes this fiery furnace. Then my pastor asked me, can you name, well, you said there was 3, so who is this 3rd person? And then I said, well, it's Fritz. And when I said his name, you could see the frowns on people's faces. Fritz wasn't liked in my neighborhood. Some called him Tattoo Man, and many others called him the devil, and he spoke with a very thick accent. Now, Fritz owned the laundromat in my neighborhood. Now, this is what he would do to get the name the devil. He would close the laundry on Saturday and open it up on Sunday. All right? So he was called the devil because many felt that he knew that the community, my community, needed the laundromat open, especially for Sunday worship. Now, on a cold Sunday in December, I played hooky from church. I was going to say school, but I did that too. Now, I spent my offering on candy, and I knew I couldn't go to church that morning. So I went to Fritz laundromat to stay warm and hang out there until after church. Now, Fritz really didn't seem like what the neighborhood described him to be. I told him my predicament, and he totally understood. So you know that was a friend right there. When he came out with some cookies and milk and gave them to me, you know, I fell in love with him. And then I began to sort of ask Fritz some questions. So as an 8-year-old, I had no filters. So I said to Fritz, I said, you know, Fritz, you know, the neighborhood calls you the devil. And he nodded, he said, yeah, I know. Then I got real friendly, and feeling real comfortable and feeling real toasty in the laundromat. I began to talk about my favorite numbers, saying that 8, because I'm 8 years old, 3, because I'm in the 3rd grade, 5, because I live on the 5th floor. And so when I finished, listing the numbers that I like, I said to Fritz, so these must be your wonderful favorite numbers too, which is one of the reasons why we called him Tattoo Man. And when we weren't calling him Tattoo Man, we were calling him the Devil. Fritz, I learned, was a Holocaust survivor. He was a professor of philosophy in Germany before he escaped with only his life. Fritz met me at the age he lost his daughter, 8 years old, and he also lost his wife. At the age of 8, I couldn't correctly say Holocaust, so I pronounced it Holocaust or Holocaust. No one in my congregation knew Fritz's story, but in sharing Fritz's story, my church, not the entire community, but my church, embraced him. When I got some years older, Fritz left me to run the laundromat on Saturdays when he would go to synagogue until he came back. As an 8-year-old, I was happy to make a good friend, and especially playing hooky from Sunday school. But Fritz taught me German, Hebrew prayers, many that I heard today, and a lot about German philosophers, which is one of the reasons why I went into the profession that I did. He poured his best in me. And I tried to teach him, to help him to assimilate to my community. I tried to teach him how to say Jesus. The way us Black folks say it. We had a lot in common. Fritz was an orphan with no family here in the States. I was an orphan in a ward of New York State. Fritz's name was changed when he got to Ellis Island so that he could be less Jewish and more American. I was given the name Ivy Monroe because I was found in a trash can in Fort Greene Park. And Sister Irene, who was the head nun of the New York Foundling Hospital, was a Marilyn Monroe fan. So you see, Fritz and I had so much in common. Now, as an adult looking back at this story, I learned many lessons, and one of them is to speak out. And that letter to a Birmingham jail that we just heard, that's what King was saying, that we need you moderates to speak out. But I learned as an 8-year-old that I spoke up for Fritz because he wasn't able to speak up for himself. And I know many of you know this wonderful statement by Reverend Martin Niemöller, a Protestant minister who fought Hitler during the Nazi era, when he said, and I know you know it, but I'm going to repeat it because it is my hope that you folks will speak out. And it says that when they came for the socialists, you can say it with me. I did not speak out because what? I was not a socialist. When they came for the trade unionists, I didn't speak out because, and then when they came for the Jews, I did not speak out because, and then they came for me. And there was no one left to speak for me. When King was invited to address the American Jewish Convention in 1958, he noted the great similarities between Jews and African Americans because both had experienced hatred and prejudice and had worked to overcome that hatred. This is what King said at an American Jewish Convention. He says, "My people were brought to America in chains. Your people were driven here to escape the chains fashioned for them in Europe. Our unity is born of our common struggle for centuries, not only to rid ourselves of bondage, but to make the oppression of any people by others an impossibility. I've been perturbed by the increase of anti-Semitism of late. The ADL reported that attacks are up by 57%. Now, what's happening in America right now is not just a crisis for Jews. It is a crisis for this nation as a whole. It is an assault on the very thing that makes us American. Now, y'all gotta say amen. Come on now. I worked all day on that one. How I came to learn about racism and intersectionality of other oppressions, both words not in my vocabulary reach as an 8-year-old girl, was through Fritz. Until I met Fritz, I thought the only oppression in the world was racism. This is one way we develop, both unknowingly and innocently, the notion of a hierarchy of oppression. It is that false belief that one oppression, and is usually your oppression, is greater than anybody else's. Come on now, y'all listen, come on. This happens because we don't see or understand other oppressions and they become normalized.
Amen.
Now, most people, I say most people, see racism today in 2020. However, anti-Semitism, we don't see until we're really made to see, because in my opinion, it has become so normalized, so pervasive as to be invisible. And so what happens here, so one of the things I always love is that when people, sort of want me to talk about racism, I always try to talk about the ism that they're addressing so they can understand my racism better. See, I understand that as an African-American lesbian Christian minister on a good day, and theologian, I know that the struggle against racism is only legitimate if I'm also fighting anti-Semitism, racism, homophobia, sexism, Islamophobia, all these isms together. I know that these isms are merely tools of oppression, which will continue to keep us fractured instead of united toward a common goal. So the title of my talk this evening is not society's isms, but healing our isms. My reasons for the title is because of King, who would be 91 if he were alive today, right? If King was among us today, he would say that it's not enough to talk about institutions, workplaces, and universities that are fractured and separate people from one another because of their race, gender, sexual orientation, and religion, and not look at ourselves. King would say that we must look at the ways that we ourselves hold up the bigotries and biases, and then need to do something about it.
All right.
In other words, these places that we talk about are broken, dysfunctional, wounded, are in the same way that we are. They become mirrors of who we may not want to be, but they're certainly mirrors of who we are. We cannot heal the world if we don't heal ourselves. So the greatest work and the most difficult work we must do in light of the teachings of our civil rights foremothers and forebrothers is to heal ourselves. And we must do this work in relationship to our social justice work out in the world. Now, Ernest Hemingway, who I don't like, but I really don't, because he was misogynistic, he was homophobic, homophobic, he was racist, but you know what it says? There's some good in everybody. Okay? Now, Ernest Hemingway, in his novel, Farewell to Arms, said this. He said that the world breaks us all, but some of us grow strong in those broken places. And I believe that God wants us to grow strong in our broken places to not only mend a sin-sick world that we live in, but also the sin-sick world we carry within ourselves. Now, come on, say what amen. And we can only do this, really, we can only do this if we look both inward and outward, healing ourselves of our personal bigotry and biases that really chip away at our good intentions. Our job in keeping King's dream alive is to remember that the longing for social justice is also inextricably tied to our personal longing for healing. Why personal healing? I'll give you 2 reasons. When we adopt the politic of respectability, we stop transferring our hatred, fears, and intolerance onto others. And the second one is really most difficult. When we adopt a politic of self-love, we stop engaging in risky behaviors, reckless relationships, and impulsive decisions that harms others as well as ourselves. So how might that look like? Well, this is how I think it looks like. Well, I say this, that when you love yourself enough, you begin to change. You quit settling for too little. You come to know your own goodness and self-worth, and you evolve to see it in others. You begin to take the gift of your life seriously and embrace that part of you that is sacred. And in so doing, you begin to see the image of the sacred in yourself, the image of the sacred as yourself, and the image of the sacred in each other. So every year, this time, I re-examine myself in light of the teachings of King Bayard Rustin, Rosa Parks, Fannie Lou Hamer, and many others. I re-examine myself, especially in looking at the ways in which the world not only breaks me as an African-American lesbian, but also the ways in which it beckons me toward healing as a moral imperative for leadership. I want to conclude by saying that in our efforts to uphold the legacy of our civil rights foremothers and forebrothers, let us be united in this journey as we look inward at ourselves to heal and outward toward the world to change it. We are infinitely more powerful together than separate. We're infinitely more healthier and honest in this struggle together. The Kwanzaa principle, Ujima, meaning unity, must take root in our self-understanding of who we are and what we decide to be as a people, as a beloved community that King talks about, and as Americans. In understanding the interconnectedness between himself and the individual, and himself as the community, African-American historian John Mbutu said this: I am because we are, and since we are, therefore I am. Amen. Thank you, God. Amen. But my cautionary note is that in our efforts to do anti-oppression work, the infighting that goes on in different communities because of race and religion and sexual orientation, to name a few, are really all symptoms of what's broken within us. In the face of our own self-respect, the fighting among us must stop, the distrust among us must stop, the competitiveness among us must stop. We must cure ourselves of our indifference to each other's oppression. Oh, I'm getting wild now. About to walk down. As a beloved community, we must all pitch in. We have come here this evening holding on to a vision that is arched towards justice. A vision that we look at the world and ourselves from an involved and an evolved, committed stance in light of a faith that wants to do justice. I want to, did I get it? Amen? All right. So I want to end these words by King when he said this. If we are to have peace on earth, our loyalties must become ecumenical rather than sectional. Our loyalties must transcend our race, our tribe, our class, and even our nation. And this means that we must develop a world perspective, because it really falls down to this. All life is interrelated. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied into a single garment of destiny. What affects one directly, I'm loving you, come on now, affects all indirectly. I cannot be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. King said, what we know to do and can fix the world. I believe we can do it. So I want to end on this. Let us be united in this journey. Let us speak in harmony of a common goal. Common be our prayer. Common be our resolution. Common be our intention. United be our hearts, and perfect be our unity. May we all say, Amen.
Page 10. We're preparing for the Aleinu. The Aleinu prayer, which begins our concluding prayers, recalls our obligations to the world. The word Aleinu means it's upon us, or it's our responsibility. And the prayer affirms that our obligation is to bring the presence of God into our broken world by working for its repair. This prayer acknowledges that the world is far from the oneness that God has envisioned for it. And yet, it proclaims in the spirit of the Hebrew prophets that one day all will experience God's oneness in the world. And so it's in that spirit that we hear again Dr. King's own words describing the dream of liberty and calling for each of us to take upon us our responsibility to bring that dream into reality and to never lose hope that it is possible. I invite you to please rise for our congregational reading. We'll hear words read from Dr. King by members of the Brookline Interfaith Clergy Association and have the opportunity as a congregation to respond.
As we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is a victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
Let us not fall under the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friends, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It's a dream deeply rooted in American dream.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
I have a dream that one day little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls, as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every mountain shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the broken places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together.
This is our hope. This is the faith that I go with. From this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day.
This will be the day when all God's children will be able to sing with a new meaning. My country is of thee, sweet land of liberty. Of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountain
America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania and from the Bay State of Massachusetts. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. Let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring.
And when this happens, when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to see that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, Muslims and all people, will be able to join hands and sing the words of the old Hebrew spiritual. Free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Thus has been said together.
The eternal God will be sovereign over all the earth. On that day, the eternal God will be one, and God's name will be one.
Remain standing for the Aleinu, page 11. Aleinu v'shabeach l'adon ha'kol, la'tei tiduna v'yotzeh b'reshit, shelo asanu k'goyei ha'aratzot, v'lo asanu k'mishpachot ha'adama, shelo samu k'elkeinu k'ahem, v'lo ra'einu k'chol ha'avonam. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. על כן נקבל לך אדוני אלוהינו לראות מהרה ותפארת וזכר לתקן עולם ומלכות שדי. ונאמר, והיה אדוני, למלך על כל הארץ, היום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד. ושמו, Remain standing, page 13. Our concluding prayer, following Jewish tradition, is the mourner's prayer, the mourner's Kaddish. And our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of the Jewish people and of all peoples, whose lives were taken through violence directed at them because of their race, gender, religion, or nationality. We honor the memory of those of every nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. Even when they are gone, they are with us, moving us to live as in their higher moments they themselves wish to live. We remember them now. They live in our hearts, and they are an abiding blessing. From Temple Sinai's community, these individuals whose yard sites we observe this week in the Jewish calendar: Flora Etta Batch, Martha Langen-Barta, Albert Cohen, Elliot Corman, Dorothy Gilly, James Gladstone, Ronald Goldner, Daniel Gordon, Arthur Israel, Ada Just, Timothy Charles Miller, Nate Morose Shapiro, Gertrude Nyman, John Robbins, Robert Rosen, Marion Birkenmeyer Sandell, Abe Schwartz, Doris Siegel, Lloyd Dudley Tarlin, Mary Weinstein, William N. Wheeler, Lois Gross Schneider. In the period of Shloshim, the 30-day period in our community, we remember Jürgen Keller, longtime member of the Temple Sinai Quartet, Herman Hirschberger, uncle of our member Deborah Leitziger, and Billy Eugene Lucas, father of our member Robin Orwant. And we offer all of them our condolences.
In the Temple Bethside community, this week we remember Sarah Altman, Eli Astroff, Sarah Sutrone, Eugene Lucero, Diana Engel, Ann Fasten, Bernard Maurice Fisher, George Fox, Darylyn Gerhard, Esther Goldstein, Racha Rachel Greenberg, Ellen Kagan, Madeline Lifshitz, Ida Magins, Abraham Magins, Ora Nuria Matalon, Betty Miller, Minna Morley, Sheldon Oates, Alec Pinar, Carl Rosenberg, Morton Simon, Lillian Smith, Charles Spiegel, Annabelle Spickbold, and Victor Wagner.
From the Ohave Shalom community, lovers of peace, we are observing Shloshim for Sandy Calmus, mother and mother-in-law of Richard and Ellen Calmus, Jim and Rachel Calmus, Stephen and Lauren Calmus. And being a synagogue that is almost 180 years old, with our list of yard sites is much too long, but we celebrate and we remember the lives of all those who were before us.
So I invite you to name others now for whom you'll be reciting Kaddish, for whom you are mourning, who you're holding in your heart on this particular evening, whose memory shall be for blessing. Please mention their names aloud.
Richard Misson.
Eddie Beyerfeld-Krantz.
Martin Luther King.
We hold them all in our hearts. And we now praise God on page 13 with the morning's prayer, praising God, the source of life and love and caring in the universe, the source of life and love and caring in our own lives. Together. Yitkadal v'yikadash Shemei Rabbah, ve'alma tivrach pirtei v'yishmachutei, v'chayechon v'yometon, v'chayei t'chol beit Yisrael, Agalav Yisman Kari Vimru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah V'varach Le'olam Amen Amen. Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yithahar V'yitromam V'yitnaseh V'yithadar V'yithalel V'yithalal Shemei Tekudesha Richu Le'ela Mikol Birchata V'shirata Tushvekata V'nechemata Tamiran V'alma V'yimru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabbah M'shamayah V'chaim Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Osei Shalom b'Bramav u'yaseh Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol Yoshvei Tedan v'imru Amen. Please be seated. Well, Shabbat Shalom. Okay, come on. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to everybody. Those who are familiar with our synagogue and with Jewish rituals on Shabbat, and those who may not be, we welcome everybody here. And we're so delighted to host everybody for this very special evening. I especially want to thank the Brookline Interfaith Clergy Association and especially the Interfaith Planning Committee for tonight's service. Over many months, we worked together to shape this service, and it's really, really wonderful. I'm very, very grateful. And I especially want to thank Tammy Kalman, who convened us and did a tremendous amount of organizing. So Tammy, thank you very much to you. I want to thank our musicians for the evening, Temple Sinai's pianist Hannah Shields, Andy O'Connell from Oave Shalom, and the Center Communities Band, Center Communities of Brookline Band, led by Rabbi Jim Morgan. Thank you so much for listening to us this evening. And I want to thank everybody who has participated in the service. Especially, I want to thank Reverend Irene Monroe for an extraordinary, beautiful, and we hold that in our hearts, and we pledge ourselves to continue doing this work, and we're inspired by your words. Thank you. Just a moment after announcements, we want to invite everybody to come downstairs for our Oneg Shabbat dessert reception. Oneg Shabbat, Oneg means, it doesn't really literally mean cookies, but that's what it's come to mean. But Oneg in Hebrew is used by also the prophet Isaiah. He says, "You shall call Shabbat a delight, an oneg." And so it's Jewish tradition to eat dessert. So please do join us downstairs. There are 3 ways to get downstairs. There is the conventional way, which is the stairway in the far corner here. That's the conventional way to get downstairs. Or you can use the door that's slightly to the right in this far corner, which for some reason at Temple Sinai we call the brotherhood door. So you can engage in brotherhood or sisterhood tonight. It takes you outside for about 20 seconds. So that's a quicker way probably downstairs, because you go outside and then inside again. So you can use that door as well. The third way is that we have a handicapped accessible elevator, which operates very slowly, but it does operate. And if you'd like to use that, that is also available, and someone from Temple Sinai will operate it for you. So please do join us downstairs so that we can gather together, we can get to know each other, and we can enjoy dessert. Now, the work goes on after tonight. And so now we want to share with you some announcements about upcoming racial justice work in Brookline, opportunities that you can be involved in so that you can identify for yourself next steps after tonight's service. Because the fight to eliminate racism, the fight to work for racial justice is a long-term fight. And we each have our own work to do. So in addition to the green handout, which is Temple Sinai's own communities events, which I encourage you to take a look at, I'm pleased to call forward members of participating communities to share with us some of the work that you can be involved in your own community or in the broader Brookline community about racism. So first I call forward Colin Stokes, who works as part of the Coalition to Eliminate Racism in Brookline, and then we have announcements from TBC as well.
So for white folks to put racial justice at the center of our lives, it's always going to be sort of a countercultural move. And when you swim upstream, you have to exert more effort. So one way I've tried to build that skill and that muscle is to make a habit of doing some learning, taking some action, and building some community around racial justice every single week. And over time, that becomes a natural part, or a more natural part of who we are. And so to help people do that, the Coalition to Eliminate Racism in Brookline puts together a weekly email newsletter called Breakthrough Brookline, and it lists a few dozen things to do. There are quite a few things to do over the next few weeks in Brookline, Cambridge, Boston, Newton area, from panel discussions to plays to rallies. And it's totally free to subscribe. Just have to remember breakthroughbrookline.org. And one of the things that we list there is a workshop called White People Challenging Racism, which is offered in Brookline and Cambridge pretty much year-round. And there's also, I would have to recommend the essential walking tour called Hidden Brookline, which reveals the history of slavery and freedom struggles right here in these streets and homes. So, please visit breakthroughbrookline.org to receive more information. Thanks so much for the chance to share that.
Tiferet.
I am so proud of TBZ and our racial equity group, and we are doing exactly what you said, Reverend Monroe, about finding out where we need to work on how we need to work first. We need to work on ourselves, we need to work on our community, or do we have the power to work at a greater level? So I'm thrilled that TBZ is partnering with Tzedek at Sinai and Nahar Shalom, Kavod, and Boston Workmen's Circle to think about reparations and teshuva. Teshuva is a word meaning of repentance, and at the high holidays, it comes to mean a fixing for that which needs fixing in our world. And we know that slavery and what happened to our Native peoples are America's original sins that we need to deal with. So there's an event, an evening of stories, tactics, and nonviolent solidarity with Rabbi Lynn Gottlieb and Dr. Dave Ragland, which is coming up on Wednesday, January 29th, from 7 to 9 at the Workmen's Circle, 6 Webster Street in Coolidge Corner. And there are flyers for the table, which is downstairs. Shabbat Shalom.
From Temple Sinai, we have a, Temple Sinai is hosting a facilitated discussion on February 9th, Sunday, February 9th, for Temple Sinai members, called Racial Justice Through a Jewish Lens, an opportunity to reflect, share, learn, and act. What do Jewish values tell us about racial justice? How has racism affected us personally, our families, our friends? What are some of the root causes of racism in our community? How can our community work together for racial justice? So that is here at Temple Sinai for Temple Sinai members, Sunday, February 9th, from 12:30 to 2:30 p.m. It starts with a light lunch. And I also believe there is a affordable housing initiative that is also deeply connected to racial justice work. And I'm looking at our student Rabbi Talia Stein. January 27th, what time and where? Here at Temple Sinai for the whole community. One more time, January 27th at what time? 7 p.m., working on issues related to affordable housing, and also, which certainly are connected to racial justice. So thank you for that, and please do join us. So there's lots of information downstairs at the tables. Pick up a flyer, and you'll be able to get additional information. We're going to conclude now, and the way we conclude is by making blessings over wine to pronounce Shabbat sacred. That's sort of our tool by which we pronounce the sanctity of Shabbat, and then with challah, because we want to keep eating. So please rise. I turn to the back page of our service. So you can remain facing this way, but I meant turning the footway to the. And let's join together. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher yishanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzah b'anu, v'shabbat kodsho v'ahava u'ratzon ikilano. Zikaro v'maaseh v'reishit, kibuno tevilah l'mikra'ei kodesh, zecher l'tziat mitzrayim, ki anu b'charta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha ve'ahava u'ratzon kin'altanu baruch atah Adonai v'kadesh Hashem. L'chaim. And once again, I want to thank my friends. It's good to have friends. And I want to thank our friends and our deep friendships that have emerged through the Brookline Interfaith Clergy Association month by month, all of these years. Thank you to my clergy partners, for joining us this evening, and thank you especially to our friends at TBZ and Ove Shalom for directing your entire communities to join us here tonight. It's very good indeed to be together. Blessing over Chala. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Shabbat shalom.